Yeah, it's the old age difference between local global versus research practice, right? We don't have to look at it that way, that there's a third way to negotiate this, and I think that, I hope, it's apparent in the way we practice and the architecture that we produce. Because you spoke about global city, is to return actually to the fantastic article that Saskia Sassen has written in the 80s, the global city, right? And I think that her primary thesis and description of the global city is that it creates two challenges, right? That it creates great homogeneity when we begin to look across the different global sites, right? That the CBD in Shanghai looks exactly like the CBD in Singapore. But on the other hand, it also creates an extreme difference, right? When we begin to look at the site, the localized site itself, right? When we begin to see the difference between the global corporation, the CBD, versus its immediate fabric, right? That it lands itself upon, right? And because of these two conditions, it's creating the friction, right? Between what we call the local and global, right? Now, I think we don't have to take sides, right, in the sense that architects either become a global architect creating a signature style that is applied indiscriminately everywhere, or a local architect who only work with a group of craftsmen in a remote area that produces work that can only be relevant to that very site itself, right? Because that completely cuts off your engagement with the wider world. And I don't think that's very interesting, right? It's almost too hermetic in that sense as a practice. At the end of the day, the question is about two things, I think. It's about creating an architecture or city that is more equitable, right, in which people can participate, whether they are the worker of the global corporation or the local resident who is staying nearby. And to create an architecture that has a certain value that is recognizable by the local residents. That entry point, to me, it's more direct than to talk about should we become those two models that I said, right? You see that in my research, right? How do we begin to understand the developmental city, to critique its shortcomings, and to offer ways to make a more equitable, more inclusive urban plan, for instance, right? When it comes to the architecture that is more recognizable, we say we start with the typical element, with the common architecture, right? In which architecture that people hold special or hold dear in a site. But again, allowing certain abstraction that make it into at least a certain invention, right? That is internal to the discipline. So to me, that is absolutely the third way. And of course, the way it is also practiced is that, unlike other practices that has a very matured style, right? Before proliferating that signature brand all over the world, I think as a practice, we arose, our practice started off in several locations. We were working on projects on several locations, and because we had to engage on several locations without a top-down signature style, it allowed us, right, to draw upon the cultural nuances, the societal demands, right, and arrive at this interest in the city and this interest in typology. I'm an internationalist as such, and we have to be, my background, I was born in Malaysia, I'm Chinese by origin, but I'm a British citizen now. So, where do I draw the line, right? If I say that I'm a local architect, local to what? Right? It's ridiculous to even ask that question, right? So I think, it's more nuanced, and I think it's richer when we reach out in both directions this way.